The ladies whispered as he descended the steps and came toward me. I took a step back, my heart racing, but he merely extended his hand, a simple gesture yet laden with ancient power. His metallic grey eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made me forget where I was. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. I still remember the night the wind howled against the windows of the main hall and the chandeliers trembled as if in fear. I was there not by choice but by obligation, dressed in pale white as if the colour could erase the stain of my birth. The illegitimate daughter of the former councillor, raised as a servant among ladies who never once called me by my name. They said I should feel honoured to have been invited to the celebration of the new pact with the Alpha King. The man whose fame crossed borders and whispers. But honour, I learned early on, is a word that always serves the powerful best. No one looked at me directly, only enough to size up what did not belong to them. My hands trembled on the thin fabric of my skirt, and the sound of laughter in the background sounded to me like blades clashing against metal. I watched in silence the empty throne at the head of the hall and felt the weight of a name that hung like a storm. The Alpha King. They said he was an untamable beast, a man forged by war and solitude, that his voice was as deep as thunder and his gaze was enough to silence a crowd. I doubted these stories until the very air seemed to change. When he entered, everything fell silent. The sound of conversations died before anyone noticed. The wind ceased, and for an instant the world seemed to hold its breath. I didn't see him. I felt him first. A dense warmth spread through the space, and only then did my eyes find him. Tall, with an impossible presence, clad in black, the king seemed to carry the very twilight on his shoulders. There was something in his posture, a brutal restraint, a dominance that could not be explained in words. He didn't seek attention. It simply bowed before him. Our eyes met by chance, or perhaps by design. And in that instant, I was certain he knew who I was, even without ever having seen me before. My entire body seemed to protest against what my mind tried to deny. That man, so distant from everything I knew, saw something in me. Something the others preferred to pretend did not exist. The ladies whispered as he descended the steps and came toward me. I took a step back, my heart racing, but he merely extended his hand, a simple gesture yet laden with ancient power. I touched his fingers hesitantly, and the heat emanating from him burned me as if I had placed my hand in fire. His eyes, an almost metallic grey, locked onto mine with an intensity that made me forget where I was. He didn't smile. He just looked at me, as if trying to decipher what I hid beneath my skin. "Do not be afraid," he said with a voice that vibrated more than it sounded. "Beasts only attack when they feel fear." I didn't answer. Perhaps because for the first time, I didn't feel in danger. The following days became an ordeal. The castle, with its long corridors and echoes of centuries, seemed to watch every step I took. The women whispered my name in dark corners, laughing like crows over carry on. "The councillor's maid," they said, imagining herself worthy of a glance from the king. I pretended not to hear, but their words tangled around me like thorns. In the morning I would wake before sunrise. My quarters were a narrow chamber at the back of the castle, where the cold seeped through the stone crevices and the smell of mildew clung to my clothes. I would dress with trembling hands, adjusting the rough apron over the faded dress I had worn since I was 15. At 18, I was still the same invisible girl, the one who carried heavy trays and cleaned the marble floors where the ladies trod without looking down. They were beautiful, those women, daughters of lords, nieces of dukes, promised to men of power. They wore silks embroidered in gold, wore jewels that shone brighter than the stars, and their hair was braided by servants who would never dare to raise their eyes. I envied them, yes, not for the luxury, but for the ease with which they inhabited the world, as if they were born knowing they deserved to be there. I, on the other hand, grew up learning to shrink, to make myself small, to never answer when they insulted me. My father, the former councillor, never publicly acknowledged me. My mother, a seamstress who worked in the castle, died when I was 7. They said it was from a fever, but I always knew it was from shame, from carrying a burden the world would never forgive. And yet, here I was, In the same castle where my mother had sewn dresses for women who despised her. In the same hall where my father pretended not to know me when I passed with a tray of wine. I was a ghost, a shadow, a stain everyone preferred to ignore. Until the king saw me. It was Lady Catherine who first confronted me. I was in the garden, gathering flowers for the arrangements on the main table, when she appeared like a perfumed storm. Tall, blonde, with blue eyes as cold as ice, she was considered the most beautiful woman in the kingdom, and the cruelest. "So it's true," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The king fixed his gaze on you the night of the banquet." I didn't look up. I continued cutting the stems of the roses, feeling the thorns scratch my fingers. "I don't know what you're talking about, my lady." She laughed. "A metallic cold sound, poor thing. Do you really think he sees you as anything more than a passing distraction? Men like the Alpha King don't settle for crumbs. They devour what they want and move on." I felt my face burn, but I kept my eyes down. I had learned that the best defense was not to react, to let the words run off me like water over a stone. She moved closer, so close I could smell the expensive perfume she wore. She bent slightly as if confiding a secret. "He desired me once, you know, before you, and I refused him, because I know my worth. But you," she paused, her gaze sweeping over my shabby dress. "You don't even know what you are. A bastard who should be grateful for a roof and food. And still you dare to raise your eyes to a king." She walked away before I could respond. Not that I would have. My throat was tight, and my hands were trembling so much that I dropped the shears on the ground. But she was right about one thing. I didn't know what I was. I only knew what I wasn't. I wasn't noble. I wasn't beautiful like them. I wasn't worthy of anything. And still the king continued to seek me out. I would see him in the corridors at night, when everyone else had retired. He walked alone, his hands clasped behind his back, his face marked by an expression I couldn't decipher. It was as if he carried the weight of 1,000 battles on his shoulders, and no victory was enough to lighten the load. One night, I was returning from the kitchen when I found him standing before one of the high windows, looking at the moon. The silver light illuminated his profile, and for an instant, he seemed less a beast and more a lost man. He sensed my presence before I could retreat. "Don't run," he said, without turning his face. His voice was soft, but there was a command in it that froze me in place. I didn't know what to do. To stay felt like audacity. To leave, an offense. He finally turned, and his eyes met mine. There was weariness in them, and something more. Something that frightened and drew me in at the same time. "What is your name?" he asked. I hesitated. No one had ever asked me that. Everyone knew who I was without needing to ask. The bastard, the servant, the shame. "Elara," I replied, almost in a whisper. He repeated my name as if testing its sound in his own voice. Then he nodded slightly, a gesture that could have meant permission or dismissal. I couldn't interpret it. As I walked away, I felt his gaze burning into my back. And I knew in that moment that something had changed. Not in the world around me, but within me. The days dragged on like shadows. I continued with my duties, serving at the tables, cleaning the halls, carrying water for the ladies' baths. But now, every time I entered a room, I felt the stares following me. Sharp glances full of unspoken questions and silent accusations. It was during a dinner that everything began to fall apart. I was serving wine to the guests when Lady Catherine raised her voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They say the king has been distracted lately," she said, with a sweet, venomous smile. Who would have thought that such a powerful man could be weakened by something so insignificant? The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt my heart race, but I continued serving, pretending not to hear. "Perhaps it's the change of season," another guest suggested, trying to change the subject. "Or perhaps," Catherine continued, "it's something more subtle. An enchantment, perhaps. Some say that certain women use indecent tricks to seduce men above their station." The silence that followed was heavy. I felt all eyes turn to me. My hand trembled and a drop of wine trickled down the side of the goblet, staining the white linen tablecloth. "Careful, servant," Catherine said with false concern. "You mustn't stain everything you touch." I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me. But something in me, something small and stubborn, refused to yield. I raised my gaze just for an instant and met her eyes. And in them I saw what she truly was, not a powerful woman. Just a frightened creature, desperate to maintain control over something that was already slipping away. I lowered my eyes again and continued my work, but I felt anger simmering inside me, hot and dangerous. That night, I was summoned to the library. My heart was beating so loudly I thought everyone in the castle could hear it. The library was a sacred place where only the most important dared to enter. And now I, a simple servant, had been called there. When I pushed the heavy door open, the smell of old parchment and ink enveloped me. The shelves soared to the ceiling, filled with ancient leather-bound volumes. And in the center of the room, lit only by the faint light of a few candles, stood the king. He didn't look up when I entered. He was leafing through a book, his long fingers gliding over the yellowed pages. "Sit," he said, still not looking at me. I obeyed, sitting in a wooden chair near the fireplace. The silence between us was dense, almost tangible. I didn't know why I was there. I didn't know what he wanted from me. Finally, he closed the book and raised his eyes. "I've been told you are mute when spoken to," he murmured, approaching. "Not mute, Your Majesty. Just not often heard." He stopped, his eyes fixed on mine. And in that moment, I felt something break, inside him perhaps, or inside me. There was an instant when I thought he would touch my face, but he just left his hand suspended in the air, as if fighting his own impulse. "You don't know what it's like to carry a name that weighs more than your own body," he said. "Perhaps I do, Your Majesty, except my name is heavy with shame and yours with power." He laughed, a short, joyless laugh, and before he left, he said quietly, almost to himself, "We are both prisoners, then." The following weeks were torment. The entire castle seemed to have turned its attention to me. I felt the stares wherever I went. I heard the whispers that ceased when I approached. And I knew deep down that something terrible was about to happen. It was Lady Catherine who orchestrated everything. I should have realized. I should have seen the signs. But I was young, naive, and a part of me still wanted to believe the world could be a less cruel place. During a banquet, in the presence of all the most important lords and ladies of the kingdom, she stood up. Her voice was clear, her smile perfect. "Your Majesty," she began, addressing the king with a graceful curtsy, "I ask for permission to bring to light a matter that concerns us all." The king watched her with an indecipherable expression. "Speak." "It is about the presence of certain people in this castle," she said, and her eyes turned to me. "People of questionable birth who seem to have forgotten their place. There are those who say these creatures use dishonest means to gain the attention of those above their station." The hall erupted in murmurs. I felt my face burn, the floor seemed to disappear beneath my feet. She continued, her voice growing sharper. "Would it not be prudent, Your Majesty, to protect the honor of this court and remove such influences? After all, a king must surround himself with worthy people, not with bastards who crawl in the shadows." The silence that followed was deafening. Every head turned to me. I was frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. And then he stood up. The king didn't need to raise his voice. The gesture alone, slow, deliberate, was enough to silence the crowd. He walked toward me, his steps echoing in the absolute silence. And under the astonished gaze of the court, he placed his cloak over my shoulders. The fabric was heavy, warm, and smelled of him, of something wild and safe at the same time. "No one touches what is under my protection," he said, his voice deep and absolute. The silence that followed was more deafening than any scream. I saw the colour drain from Catherine's face. I saw the lords exchange uncomfortable glances. I saw the entire world reconfigure itself around me, and I knew, in that moment, that there was no turning back. That night, alone in my quarters, I touched the heavy fabric on me and realized that, for the first time, I didn't feel cold. The world still hated me, perhaps more than ever, but something inside me had changed. The beast everyone feared had offered me shelter, and I understood that the real danger wasn't in the wolf's teeth, but in the desire to be touched by him. The days that followed were strange. The castle seemed to breathe differently, as if the very air had changed texture. The ladies avoided me, but now with fear instead of disdain. The servants greeted me with bows that made me uncomfortable. And I, who had always been invisible, now felt exposed, as if I were naked before everyone. The king summoned me to his chambers for the first time on a rainy afternoon. The messenger who came for me was an older man with a face marked by scars, who looked at me with an expression that seemed to be both a warning and a compassion. The royal chambers were vast, much larger than I had imagined. The walls were covered with tapestries telling stories of ancient battles, and the bed was large enough for 5 people. But what caught my attention most was the loneliness that permeated everything. Despite the luxury, there was something abandoned about the place, as if no one really lived there. He was on the balcony watching the rain fall over the kingdom. He didn't turn when I entered. "Close the door," he said. I obeyed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break through my chest. He finally turned, and his eyes, those metallic grey eyes, studied me in silence. There was something different about him, a vulnerability I had never seen before. "Do you know why I brought you here?" he asked. I shook my head, unable to speak. He took a few steps toward me, and I instinctively backed away until my back touched the door. "Because you are the only person in this damned castle who doesn't lie to me," he said. "The only one who wants nothing, who doesn't pretend, who doesn't bow with ulterior motives." I swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say, Your Majesty." "Then don't say anything," he replied, stopping a few inches from me. "Just," he hesitated, and for the first time I saw something close to uncertainty in his eyes. "Just stay." And I stayed. Nothing happened that afternoon. He just asked me to sit near the fireplace while he read reports on the kingdom's harvests. From time to time, he would comment on something he read, and I would respond with short phrases, still insecure. But there was something comforting in that shared silence, as if for the first time in our lives, we could both simply exist without needing to be something for someone. When night fell, he walked me to the door. "Can you come tomorrow?" he asked. And there was a hesitation in his voice that made me realize this powerful man was, in a way, asking instead of ordering. "Yes, Your Majesty," I replied. "Just call me by my name when we are alone," he said. "The formality tires me." I didn't know his name. No one used it. He was just the Alpha King, the ruler, the beast. He saw the surprise on my face and he smiled, a small, sad smile. "Kyle," he said. "My name is Kale." And so began something I had no words to describe. Every day at dusk, I would go to his chambers. Sometimes we talked. He told me about the difficulties of ruling, about the impossible decisions he had to make, about the weight of being responsible for thousands of lives. Other times we would just sit in silence, he reading or staring into the fire, and I embroidering or simply watching the rain through the window. He never touched me beyond casual gestures, a hand on my shoulder, fingers brushing mine when passing a book. But there was an intimacy in it that went beyond the physical. It was as if we were building something fragile and precious, something the world outside would never understand. But the world outside had not forgotten us. It was during a council meeting that everything exploded. I was serving wine to the councillors, as I always did, when I heard my name mentioned. "This woman's influence over Your Majesty is concerning," said Lord Matthias, a fat, red-faced man. "The people are starting to talk. They say the king is bewitched." Kyle was sitting at the head of the table, his fingers interlaced, his face a mask of indifference. But I knew that expression. It was the one he used when he was about to lose control. "What exactly are the people saying?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "That Your Majesty is blind," another councillor intervened, a younger man with dark hair. "That you allow yourself to be led by," he hesitated, searching for the words, "inappropriate distractions." "Inappropriate," Kyle repeated, and there was a thread of steel in his voice. "Continue," the councillor swallowed hard. "With all due respect, Majesty, there are matters of lineage to consider. A king needs a queen of noble blood. He needs legitimate heirs. And this," he looked at me with disdain, "this creature can offer neither." I felt my face burn. My hands were trembling so much I almost dropped the wine pitcher. But I forced myself to remain still, to keep my head down. Kyle rose slowly. The movement was so controlled, so deliberate, that it made everyone in the room freeze. "This creature," he said, and his voice was like ice, "has a name. And if any of you speak of her that way again, you will discover what happens when my patience runs out." He paused, his eyes scanning every face around the table. "You are dismissed, all of you." The councillors hurried out, with the exception of Lord Matthias, who dared to stay behind. "Majesty," he began, "we must think of the kingdom, of the difficult times ahead. An alliance with the House of Valmont could—" Kyle cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. "If I cared for political alliances, Matthias, I would have married years ago. I don't care what the council thinks. I don't care what the people whisper. And I certainly don't care for your opinion on whom I choose to spend my time with. But Majesty—" "Out," Kyle roared. And for the first time, I saw the beast everyone said he was. Lord Matthias exited quickly, and a heavy silence fell over the hall. I was still standing in the corner trying to make myself invisible. Kyle turned to me, and the fury in his eyes gave way to something softer, more dangerous perhaps. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said. "It's nothing I didn't already know." I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. He walked to me, and this time, when he raised his hand to touch my face, he didn't hesitate. His fingers were rough, calloused from holding swords, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "They are afraid," he said. "Afraid that something or someone might have power over me. But the truth is," he paused, "the truth is they already have, for a long time. I'm only just beginning to realize it now." "I don't understand," I whispered. He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Neither do I, but I'm trying." That night he kissed me for the first time. It wasn't dramatic or passionate. It was hesitant, almost shy, as if he were afraid of breaking me. His lips were warm against mine, and I felt something inside me unravel, like ice melting under the sun. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. "I can't promise you an easy future," he said. "I can't promise the world will be kind, but I can promise that as long as there is air in my lungs, no one will hurt you." And I believed him. God help me, I believed him. The months that followed were a whirlwind. The court was divided. Some began to treat me with forced respect, others with open hostility. Lady Catherine disappeared from the castle, sent away by the king after one last attempt to poison me with rumours. I never knew exactly what he said to her, but she left at dawn, her face white with fury and humiliation. Kyle began to include me in aspects of his life that were previously private. He took me on walks through the gardens where we talked about everything and nothing. He introduced me to his closest advisors, men who looked at me with suspicion but dared not contradict their king. He gave me books from his personal library, and we would spend hours discussing philosophy, history, and poetry. He taught me to read maps and told me about the neighbouring kingdoms. He taught me about the stars and how ancient navigators used them to find their way. And slowly, very slowly, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be something more than the bastard, the servant, the shame. But the world never lets us forget who we were. It was during the winter festival that reality struck me again. The castle was filled with visitors from other kingdoms, and Kyle was obligated to play the part of the perfect host. I was in the crowd wearing a new dress he had commissioned for me, a fine dark blue fabric that made me feel less like myself and more like someone I could be. I saw her when she arrived, a stunning woman with black hair and green eyes, dressed in blood red. Lady Isadora, a princess from a distant kingdom, betrothed to the king years ago before he refused the marriage and plunged into his wars. She moved through the hall as if she owned it, greeting everyone with gracious smiles and sweet words. And when her eyes met Kyle's, there was something there, a history, a past. I felt a pang of something that could only be jealousy. I had never felt it before. I had never had anything worth protecting. Kyle saw me watching and crossed the hall to me. He took my hand and kissed it, a public, daring gesture that made everyone stop and stare. "Pay her no mind," he murmured against my skin. "She means nothing." But I saw the way Lady Isadora watched us, and I knew that for her, that wasn't true. She sought me out later in the garden, where I had gone for fresh air and to escape the suffocating crowds. "So it's you," she said, her foreign accent making the words more melodic. "The little servant who captured the king's heart." I turned, prepared to defend myself, but she didn't seem hostile. Just curious. I captured nothing, I replied. He chose me. I don't know why. She laughed, a genuine sound. I do, because you're real. Because you don't pretend. Kyle always hated pretense. I don't understand. She approached, her green eyes studying me. He offered me a kingdom, you know, years ago. Offered marriage, power, everything. And I refused, because I wanted love first. I wanted him to desire me, not just my position. And he didn't desire you, I said, understanding. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. No, he respected me. Admired me even. But he never looked at me the way he looks at you. As if he's seeing the sun for the first time after years of darkness. I felt tears sting my eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know, she said, placing a gentle hand on my arm, that what you have with him is rare, precious, and there are many who will try to destroy it, not because they hate you, but because they can't stand to see something so pure in such a corrupt world. She walked away before I could answer, disappearing into the shadows of the garden. That night, Kyle came to my new chambers, more dignified rooms he had insisted I occupy. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped from the weight of a full day of politics and falsehoods. Without a word, he lay down on my bed, pulling me into his arms. I nestled against his chest, listening to the strong beat of his heart. Sometimes I wish, he said softly, that we could just leave all this behind. Live somewhere no one knew us. And why don't we? I asked, knowing it was an impossible fantasy. Because I am king, he replied, and there was so much weight in that word. Because I have responsibilities, people who depend on me. And because, he held me tighter, because if we ran they would call you a thief. They would say you stole the king from his people, and I couldn't bear for them to think that of you. So we're trapped. Yes, he agreed, but at least we're trapped together. Spring arrived, bringing new challenges. Rumors of war with the Northern Kingdom began to circulate. Kyle spent more and more time in meetings with his generals, planning strategies, preparing defenses. I saw him less, and when we did meet, he was distant, his mind clearly elsewhere. It was during one of those nights that the attack happened. I was alone in my chambers when I heard the sound of breaking glass. Before I could scream, a hand covered my mouth and I felt the cold edge of a blade against my throat. "Don't scream," a male voice hissed in my ear. "We don't want to hurt you. Yet." There were 3 men, all dressed in black, their faces covered. They dragged me through the dark corridors, using passages I didn't even know existed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I would faint from fear. They took me to an abandoned hall deep within the castle, where a man was waiting. Even in the darkness, I recognized Lord Matthias. "I'm sorry it has come to this," he said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "But you left me no choice. The king is blind, and someone needs to save him from himself." "You won't get away with this," I said, trying to sound brave even as I feared my voice would tremble. "He will come for me. And he will find your body," Matthias replied coldly. "A tragic accident. A fall from the ramparts, perhaps, or an unfortunate encounter with thieves. The possibilities are endless." I was about to respond when I heard it. A roar, not human. Something primitive, fierce that made even Matthias turn pale. The door exploded into splinters and Kyle entered. But it was not the calm, controlled man I knew. His eyes glowed with a golden light, and there was something wild about him, something that confirmed all the rumors about the beast he could become. What happened next was swift and brutal. Matthias's guards tried to stop him, but Kyle knocked them down as if they were straw dolls. I saw the moment he noticed the blade against my throat, saw the decision being made in his eyes. "Let her go," he said, and his voice was so cold it made the air around us seem to freeze. "Now," Matthias laughed, a nervous sound. "Or what, you'll kill me? Kill a member of your own council?" Without hesitation, Kyle replied, "Yes," and Matthias saw that he was serious. The blade fell from my throat and I staggered forward. Kyle caught me before I fell, pulling me behind him, shielding me with his own body. Matthias and his men were arrested that night. The execution was set for the following week, and although a part of me knew it was justice, another part couldn't stop thinking about the blood that would be shed because of me. Kyle didn't leave me alone after that. He placed guards at my door, doubled the castle's security, and insisted that I sleep in his chambers, where he could protect me. "I almost lost you," he said that night, holding my face between his hands. "I almost lost you, and I realized I would rather abdicate the throne than live a day without you." "Don't say that," I whispered. "Your people need you." "I need you," he replied, and there was such intensity in his eyes it took my breath away. "I need you like I need air, like I need light. And I don't care who knows it." He kissed me then, and it wasn't gentle or hesitant. It was desperate, possessive, as if he wanted to mark me as his for all time. And I let him, because I needed him too. I needed the way he saw me, not as the bastard or the servant, but just as Ilara, as myself. The summer brought changes. Kyle began to teach me about governance, including me in discussions about policies and decisions. Some councillors protested, but after what happened to Matthias, no one dared to challenge him openly. I learned quickly. I discovered I had an aptitude for numbers, for understanding the needs of the people. Kyle took me to the villages, where we talked with farmers and merchants, listening to their grievances and trying to find solutions. And slowly, very slowly, I began to earn respect. Not from everyone, never from everyone, but from some. It was during one of these visits that something happened that would change everything. We were in a small village near the border when a child approached me. She was a girl of perhaps 6 with dark hair and large eyes. "Are you the king's lady?" she asked, her voice shy. I didn't know what to answer. I wasn't a lady. I had no title. But before I could speak, Kyle knelt beside her. "She is more than that," he said softly. "She is my heart." The child smiled and offered me a wildflower she had picked. "For the lady of the heart," she said. I accepted the flower, feeling tears burn my eyes. And when I looked at Kale, I saw the same emotion reflected on his face. That night, under the stars, he asked me a question. "Marry me." I looked at him, not believing what I was hearing. "What? Marry me," he repeated, holding my hands. "I know it will cause a scandal. I know there will be opposition, but I don't care. I want you to be my queen. Not for politics or duty, but because I can't imagine my future without you in it." "But your people," I began. He cut me off with a kiss. "My people will have to accept it, or find another king." I laughed through my tears. "You're mad. For you? Completely." And so, under that starry sky, with the wilting flower still in my hand, I said yes. The wedding was set for the autumn. The preparation was chaotic. Half the court was horrified, the other half curious to see what would happen. Invitations were sent to neighbouring kingdoms, and the responses were mixed. Some politely declined, others accepted, probably just to witness the scandal. Lady Isadora was one who accepted. She arrived a week before the ceremony, bringing gifts and blessings. We became surprisingly friends. She taught me about royal etiquette, how to behave in diplomatic situations, and how to handle the constant pressure of being watched. "Remember," she told me, as she helped me choose fabrics for the wedding dress, "that no matter what you do, there will always be those who criticize you. So you might as well do what makes you happy." "And if I fail?" I asked, voicing the fear that consumed me. "What if I'm not good enough?" "Then you will fail," she answered with a shrug. "And you will learn. And you will try again. It's what we all do." The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I stood on the balcony of my chambers looking at the castle lit by hundreds of torches, listening to the distant sounds of the final preparations. Kyle found me there. He wasn't supposed to be there. It was bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony, but neither of us cared much for superstitions. "Are you scared?" he asked, standing beside me. "Terrified," I admitted. He took my hand, lacing our fingers together. "Me too." "You? The great Alpha King, afraid?" He smiled. "Of many things. Of failing you. Of not being the man you deserve. Of waking up one day and discovering this was all a dream." I squeezed his hand. "It's not a dream. This is real and scary and perfect." He kissed me, soft and long, and for a moment the entire world disappeared. It was just the two of us, under the stars, on the threshold of something new and terrifying and wonderful. The ceremony was everything I could have imagined, and nothing I expected. The hall was decorated with flowers from all over the kingdom, and when I entered, dressed in white silk embroidered in silver, the silence was absolute. All eyes were on me, some with curiosity, others with disapproval, a few with something that might be respect, but I only had eyes for him. Kyle stood at the altar, dressed in black with gold accents, and when our eyes met, he smiled. Not the political smile he used for the court, but a real smile, just for me. When I reached his side, he took my hands, and they were trembling just as much as mine. The priest recited the traditional vows, but when it was our turn to speak, Kyle asked for permission to say his own words. "Ilara," he began, his voice firm but laden with emotion, "when I first saw you, I saw something I had long stopped believing existed. I saw truth. I saw strength. I saw light where there was only darkness. I can't promise you an easy path because I know it won't be, but I promise to be by your side every step of the way. I promise to protect you, to honor you, and to love you for the rest of my days and beyond." Tears streamed down my face when it was my turn to speak. "Kyle," I said, my voice trembling. "My whole life I was invisible. I was the bastard, the servant, the shame. But you saw me. You didn't just look at me. You saw me. You saw who I was beyond the scars and the shame. And for that, for teaching me that I am worthy of being seen, I will love you forever." There wasn't a dry eye in the hall, not even among those who had opposed the union. When the priest declared us husband and wife, Kyle swept me into his arms and kissed me, and the hall erupted in applause and cheers. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. Not to the castle, not to the title, but to him. And he to me. The banquet that followed was grand. Abundant food, freely flowing wine, music, and dancing until dawn. I danced with Kyle, and he held me as if I were the most precious thing in the world. I danced with Lady Isadora, who whispered congratulations and good luck. I even danced with some of the councillors who had once despised me, and though their greetings were formal, they were sincere. When the night finally ended and we were alone in our chambers, Kyle looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race. "My queen," he said, and there was so much pride and love in those words I thought my heart would burst. "My king," I replied, and it was true. He was mine just as I was his. That night, he made me his in every way, and when I fell asleep in his arms, I felt complete for the first time in my entire existence. The months that followed were a period of adjustment. Learning to be a queen was different from learning about governance. There were protocols to follow, appearances to maintain, expectations to meet. I made mistakes, of course. Sometimes I used the wrong fork at formal dinners or forgot to curtsy to visitors of higher importance. But Kyle was always there, guiding me gently, reminding me that I was learning and that it was okay not to be perfect. The biggest change came when I discovered I was expecting a child. The news spread through the castle like wildfire, and the reactions were mixed. Some celebrated, seeing it as proof that our union was blessed. Others murmured about impure blood and broken bloodlines. But for Kyle and me, none of that mattered. He placed his hand on my still flat stomach and smiled with such joy that I thought I saw tears in his eyes. "An heir," he whispered. "Our child. Or a daughter," I corrected. "Or a daughter," he agreed, kissing my forehead. "And she will be loved. No matter what the world says." The pregnancy was difficult. I was often sick, and there were days when I could barely get out of bed. But Kyle was always with me, holding my hair when I was sick, bringing me calming teas, reading to me until I fell asleep. It was during the 6th month that the real threat emerged. Messengers brought news that the Northern Kingdom was mobilizing troops. The war we had feared was finally coming. Kyle had to leave to lead his army. The farewell was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I clung to him, afraid it would be the last time I would see him. "Come back to me," I begged. "Promise you'll come back." He held my face in his hands, his deep grey eyes on mine. "I promise. For you, for our child, I promise I will return." And then he was gone, taking most of the castle's soldiers with him. The months that followed were agony. News from the war came sporadically, and every messenger who appeared made my heart stop. There were victories and defeats, advances and retreats. And I waited, my belly growing, counting the days until he returned. It was during a stormy night that my labor began. It was too early, the midwife said, worried, but the baby would not wait. The pain was unimaginable, as if my body were being torn in half. I screamed until I was hoarse, clutched the sheets until my fingers bled. And the whole time, all I could think was that I wanted Kale there. I wanted his hand in mine, his voice telling me everything would be okay. But he wasn't there, and I had to be strong alone. When I finally heard the faint but determined cry of my baby, I collapsed into tears. "A girl," the midwife announced, placing the small bundle in my arms. A beautiful baby girl. She was perfect. Tiny, with a dark fuzz of hair and eyes that already promised to be the same grey as her father's. I held her against my chest and swore I would protect this child with my life. I named her Alara, which meant defender, because she would be strong, she would be loved, and she would never, ever know the shame I had known. Kale returned 2 weeks later, thin, tired, with a new scar cutting across his left eyebrow, but alive, gloriously alive. When he entered the room and saw me and our daughter, he stopped as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Then, with slow steps, he approached, looking at the small, sleeping face with an expression of total admiration. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the baby's cheek with a calloused finger. "Like her father," I replied. Smiling, he sat on the edge of the bed and held us, me and our daughter, and for a long moment, we just stayed like that, a family, complete. The years that followed brought challenges, of course. There was always some crisis, some difficult decision, some disgruntled noble. But we faced everything together, Kyle and I. He consulted me on matters of the kingdom, and I helped him see perspectives he might have missed. We became not just husband and wife, but true partners. Alara grew up strong and stubborn with her father's temper and, Kyle insisted, my kind heart. She was adored by everyone in the castle, even by those who had once opposed our marriage. And when she smiled, she lit up the whole world. I never forgot where I came from. I never forgot the servant I was, the invisible one, the bastard. And I used that memory to be a better queen. I opened the castle halls to the people, created laws that protected the most vulnerable established schools so that children like me could learn to read and write. Kyle supported me in everything, and together we changed the kingdom. Not all at once, not perfectly, but we changed it. But peace never lasts forever, and fate always has one more lesson to teach. Alara was only 3 years old when the second major crisis arrived. A devastating plague began to spread through the kingdom, killing crops and sickening livestock. The people began to starve, and with hunger came despair, and with despair came the whispers. Some said it was a curse, that the gods were displeased with a king who had married a bastard, that the royal bloodline was tainted, and the kingdom was paying the price for this transgression. The murmurs were quiet at first, but they grew like a wildfire fueled by fear and superstition. I heard everything, every poisonous word, every accusing glance, and for the first time since I became queen, I began to doubt. Maybe they were right. Maybe I really was a curse. Kyle sensed my anguish. He always did. "No," he said firmly, holding my face between his hands when he found me crying on the balcony one night. "Don't let these whispers poison your mind. The plague has nothing to do with you. It is just nature taking its cruel course." "But what if they're right?" I whispered. "What if I'm the cause of all this suffering?" He kissed me desperately as if he could transfer his certainty to me through his touch. "Then I am just as guilty for choosing you. And I don't regret it. I will never regret it." But the words, however sincere, could not silence the fear growing in my chest. It was Lady Isadora who pulled me out of that spiral of guilt. She had remained in the kingdom, becoming my closest advisor and friend. One night, she entered my chambers without knocking, her face determined. "Get up," she ordered. I looked at her, confused. "What?" I said, "Get up. We're going out." She dragged me through the corridors, ignoring my protests until we reached the stables. There, 2 horses were already saddled and ready. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To the village," she replied, mounting gracefully. "If you want to know what the people really think of you, let's go ask them." And so, disguised in simple cloaks and hoods, we rode to the nearest village. It was night, and the streets were almost deserted. But we found a tavern where a few men and women had gathered, drinking cheap ale and talking in low voices. We entered discreetly and sat in a dark corner, listening. "The king is doing what he can," said an old man, his face deeply wrinkled. "He sent grain from the royal reserves, opened the castle's granaries." "But it's not enough," a woman retorted. "My children cry from hunger every night." "The queen has also done her part," another voice intervened. "She came here herself last week, remember? She brought medicine and spoke with every family. My daughter was sick, and the queen stayed with her until the fever broke." I remembered that girl. I remembered holding her small warm hand, singing to her until she fell asleep, promising that everything would be all right. "They say she's a curse," the old man muttered. "That the gods reject her." A heavy silence followed. Then the woman who had spoken of her children spoke up, her voice clear and firm. "I don't know about gods or curses, but I know that when my husband died and I had no way to feed my children, it was the queen who gave me work in the castle kitchens. It was she who looked me in the eyes and called me by my name. The gods can say what they will, but to me, she is a blessing." Others agreed, sharing their own stories. Stories I didn't even know had an impact. Small acts of kindness I had done without a second thought, now recounted as if they were miracles. Tears streamed down my face as we left the tavern. Isadora hugged me, laughing softly. "You see, the people love you. Not all of them, never all of them. But the ones who matter, the ones who really know you, they love you." And she was right. In the following days, I began to go out more, to visit the villages personally, to work alongside the people distributing food and medicine. Kyle came with me whenever he could, and together we faced the crisis head-on. The plague eventually passed, as all plagues do. The following harvests were bountiful, and slowly the kingdom began to recover. And when it did, there was something different in the air. An acceptance. Not universal, it would never be universal, but enough. The years continued to pass, bringing their joys and sorrows. Alara grew up fast and curious, always asking questions that left me speechless. She had a natural aptitude for swords, something we discovered when she was only 5, and convinced one of the guards to teach her some basic moves. Kyle was horrified at first, but I insisted that she should learn to defend herself. The world was cruel, especially to women, and if our daughter wanted to wield a sword in addition to wearing a ball gown, then so be it. She became formidable, my little warrior. By the age of 10, she could disarm men twice her size, and Kale couldn't hide the pride in his eyes when he watched her train. It was also when Alara was 10 that I discovered I was pregnant again. This time, it was easier both physically and emotionally. I already knew what to expect. I already had the love and support not just of Kyle, but of an entire kingdom. The baby was born during the winter, a robust boy with powerful lungs and the same dark hair as his sister. We named him Darian, in honor of Kyle's paternal grandfather, a legendary warrior who had unified the northern lands. Alara loved having a younger brother. She treated him like her living doll, carrying him everywhere, singing to him, fiercely protecting him from any perceived threat. And Darian, from the first moment, adored her back, his eyes always searching for his older sister in any room. But not all were happy moments. The weight of the crown never completely disappeared. There were always difficult decisions to make, always necessary sacrifices. It was when Darian was 2 that we received the news that would change everything. The king of the neighboring kingdom, an old enemy of Kyle's from the war times, had died. His son, the new king, sent a peace proposal, and with it a condition. A marriage alliance between our kingdoms. He wanted Alara as his future bride. The mere suggestion infuriated me. Alara was only 12. She was a child, and the idea of promising her to a man we didn't know, of sending her far away from us, was unbearable. Kyle shared my sentiment, but he also understood the politics. An alliance with that kingdom would mean lasting peace. It would mean security for our people. It would mean Darian could grow up without knowing war, as Kyle had. We talked about it for weeks, sleepless nights, discussing all the possibilities. And finally, we decided to do something neither of us had considered before. We decided to ask Alara. She listened to us in silence, her small face too serious for her age. When we finished explaining the situation, she was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Finally she spoke, her voice firm despite her youth. "Can I meet him first, before I decide?" It was a simple question, but heavy with maturity. And in that moment, I realized my daughter was no longer a child. She was a young woman, capable of understanding the weight of decisions and the responsibilities that would come with her position. "Of course," Kyle replied, his voice hoarse with emotion. "We can invite him for a visit. And if you don't like him, if you feel you couldn't be happy, then we will refuse. No matter the cost," Alara nodded, satisfied. "Then I want to meet him." The young king arrived the following spring. His name was Theron, and he was 20, 8 years older than Alara. Tall, with honey-coloured hair and kind eyes, he looked nothing like the tyrannical father Kyle had faced in battle. I watched carefully as he interacted with my daughter. He was respectful but not condescending. He treated her as an equal, not as a child or a prize to be won. They talked about books, about falconry, about the responsibilities of ruling, and slowly, very slowly, I saw something blossom between them. Not love, not yet, but respect, friendship, and the potential for something more. After 2 weeks, Theron asked for permission to speak with me alone. We met in the gardens where the roses were beginning to bloom. "Your Majesty," he began, then stopped, correcting himself. "Ilara, may I call you that?" I nodded, curious about what he would say. "I know my father caused much suffering to your kingdom. I know there is a painful history between our lands, and I know that asking for your daughter's hand is asking for much, perhaps too much." He paused, looking at the flowers. "But I want you to know that I will never force Alara into anything. If she accepts this marriage, I will do everything in my power to make her happy. I will respect her opinions, honor her choices, and protect her autonomy. She will not just be my queen, she will be my partner." There was a sincerity in his words that touched me. I saw in him something of the young Kyle, the man who had looked at me with respect when no one else did. "Why are you so different from your father?" I asked. He smiled sadly. "Because I grew up seeing what hatred and cruelty did to a man. I saw my father die alone and bitter with no one by his side. And I promised myself I would be different, that I would rule with justice, not with fear. And that when I married, it would be with someone who could challenge me, make me better. Someone like Alara." Later that night, Alara came to me, climbing into my lap as she used to do when she was little, though now her long legs dangled awkwardly. "Mother," she said, resting her head on my shoulder, "I think I like him. Not the way you like father, not yet. But I think I could, with time." "You don't have to decide now," I said, stroking her hair. "You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you." "But if I don't decide now," she argued, "there might be war. And I don't want Darian to grow up in war. I don't want our people to suffer." My wise, brave, impossible girl. At just 12 years old, she was willing to sacrifice her own guaranteed happiness for the good of her kingdom. "Then we'll do this," I said. "The engagement will be announced, but the wedding will only happen when you are 18. That gives you 6 years to get to know him better, to be sure. And if at any point you change your mind, we will respect your decision." She agreed, and so it was done. The engagement was announced in a grand ceremony sealing the peace between our kingdoms. Theron returned to his lands, but he visited regularly, and Alara visited him too, always accompanied by guards and chaperones. As the years passed, I saw the affection between them grow. They exchanged long letters, shared interests, laughed together when they met. And although my mother's heart ached at the thought of eventually letting her go, I knew she would be fine, that she had chosen her own path, just as I had chosen mine. Darian grew too, a cheerful and curious boy who seemed to inherit the best of both his parents. He had the kindness and empathy I always tried to cultivate, and the strength and determination of Kale. At 5, he was already announcing that he would be the best swordsman in the kingdom, practicing relentlessly with his wooden sword. One night, after putting the children to bed, Kale and I found ourselves on our favorite balcony, the one where so many important conversations had taken place. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said, pulling me into his arms. "Farther than I ever dreamed possible," I agreed, snuggling into his chest. He kissed the top of my head. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find it was all a dream. That I'm still that lonely man, surrounded by people but completely alone. I lifted my face to look at him. It wasn't a dream. I touched his face, this is real. We are real. He kissed me then, long and deep, and for a moment it was just the two of us again. Not the king and queen, not the worried parents. Just Kale and Ilara, two souls who found each other in the midst of chaos and chose to hold on to one another. The challenges continued, as they always do. There were economic crises, territorial disputes, political intrigues, but we faced everything together, and each obstacle overcome made us stronger. I never forgot my origins. I kept the habit of visiting the villages, of talking with the people, of listening to their concerns. I created more schools, established orphanages for children like I had been, implemented laws that protected the vulnerable and punished the abusers. Some nobles complained that I was changing traditions too much, that I was giving too much power to the commoners. But Kyle supported me in everything, and together we slowly reformed the kingdom into something more just, more kind. When Ilara finally turned 18, the wedding with Theron was held. It was a magnificent ceremony, uniting two kingdoms that had been enemies for generations. And when I saw my daughter walk down the aisle toward her future, dressed in white silk just as I had been years before, I felt pride and sadness in equal measure. But the sadness lessened when I saw the look in her eyes as she met Theron at the altar. It was love. Real, true, deep. They had had time to get to know each other, to build a solid foundation, and I knew she would be happy. After the ceremony, Ilara came to me, already dressed for her departure. "Mother," she said, her hands holding mine. "Thank you for everything, for teaching me to be strong, for showing me that I can be both kind and fierce, for letting me choose my own path." I hugged her, trying to memorize her scent, the feeling of having her in my arms. "I only followed your example, my dear. You taught me as much as I taught you." When she left, Kyle held me as I cried. But they were good tears, the tears of a mother watching her daughter fly to her own destiny. Today, as I write these words, I sit in the library where he once asked me if I was mute. Ilara is at my feet, reading one of her favorite books, and Kale is by my side, reviewing reports but occasionally pausing to kiss my temple. Life is not perfect. There are still those who murmur about my origins. There are still challenges to face. There are still nights when I wake up afraid that everything will fall apart. But then I look at this man beside me, this beast who offered me shelter when no one else would, and I remember that together, we are stronger than any storm. They said the Alpha King was an uncontrollable beast, but I discovered the truth. I discovered that behind the beast was a man who just wanted to be seen, just like me. And in his arms, my fragile body found more than shelter. It found a home. If you have come this far on this journey with me, let your heart speak in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to believe that even in the darkest places, love can blossom. Don't forget to like if this narrative touched your soul, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the strength of those who dare to defy fate. May each of you find your own shelter, your own place of belonging.